The government will be releasing its green paper on child abuse tomorrow. It will look at issues such as mandatory reporting, greater information sharing between government agencies and a rethink of whānau first. Social Minister Paula Bennett launched the review in April to try and kickstart a national debate. Critics, though, aren't so sure it's going to solve the problem, instead calling it a political stunt to cover up the government's inaction. Joining me now is Social Development Minister Paula Bennett. Thanks so much for coming and joining us this morning, Minister. It is good to talk, but we have spoken quite a lot about this. How, in your view, is this paper going to help the situation?
It's quite different. So a green paper is something that we haven't done for around 14 years in this country, was the last one I could find. It's quite a different way of developing policy, so it really is posing a problem, putting a government solution to it and then asking the public what they think. We've done a lot of initiatives around child abuse. We have multidisciplinary teams. We introduced the Never Shake a Baby. I was here just a couple of months ago talking about $44 million extra spend in this year's budget on those most broken children. But the next set of moves are controversial. They affect all New Zealanders. They are moving resources into those families. And I think New Zealand needs to have a say in that, and we need a more like a 10-year action plan coming out of it.
Research by a social work lecturer has just come to light this week. She says that we've made Māori the public face of child abuse. She argues that more Pākehā abuse children. Has the media made Māori the face of child abuse, do you think?
It just saddens me so much when you see those beautiful little Māori faces on TV, but unfortunately 9 out of 12 of the last deaths of children have been Māori children. Around 55% of substantiated cases of child abuse are Māori. I sort of agree though in one point where I sort of say if we only thought it was a Māori problem we would be not addressing the other 50%. So it's not just a Māori problem, it is a New Zealand problem, and they're not the only ones that abuse their children. But they are disproportionately high for the percentage of the population.
Instead of looking internally at how to solve this problem, we have such a problem with child abuse. It's a very high rate, and that's on a world basis. Why not look offshore for help? Is there an organisation, is there someone overseas who can help us? Because the reality is, as you say, it's not getting any better. It's if anything, it's probably getting worse.
There are things we do here that we do better than overseas. So there are cases where, particularly with our intensive home visiting, things like Plunket, we're held up internationally as being at the forefront of those kinds of initiatives. So it really is it's incredibly complex. I have looked overseas, I've been to the UK, I've looked at some of what they're doing in America, we've studied reports from other countries, but the reality is we have a unique situation in New Zealand as far as how we live and how we raise our children. And I think our solutions are going to come locally.
How can it be, though, in a country like New Zealand that we have the Kahui twins, those two little boys who died 5 years ago, still no justice? In a forward-thinking Western nation like New Zealand, we still have no justice for those two boys. How can that be? What's wrong in our system now?
Just when you look at some cases, and I'm careful because we still have them, some of them before the courts, not the Kahuis but others, and we're currently going through the courts looking at where their case is at. There's so many professionals involved and so many people knowing the family and knowing they're at risk, and actually a lot of money being spent in there. And when I look at it, I think that often what has happened is well-intentioned professionals and community groups starting to look at the adults and looking at each other and forgetting that there's kiddies in there. And I think that's part of that information sharing, part of that child first, and part of the things that we address in this paper that are just so necessary. And it's too hard for me to sort of say why there hasn't been justice, but it breaks your heart.
Isn't it a little bit like closing the door after the horse is bolted when we look at trying to stop child abuse as opposed to trying to prevent it? We've got situations where children are having children in this country. They're just not equipped with how to look after babies, and we're seeing these horrific levels of abuse. Should we not be looking at that more so than identifying child abuse at the later stage?
So there's about 4,500 teen parents on benefit in this country born each year, so babies born each year, so there's more than that actually on benefit. About 1,200 of them are aged 16 or 17 years old. Percentage-wise, about 45% will have another child while on benefit. Most of them do okay if they've got the right kind of support and families around them, but there's no doubt about it that teen parents are our most vulnerable group. So then we have programs like Family Start, where we put about $30 million into that, which is an intensive home-based parenting program effectively. Sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not. So we are completely reviewing that and are putting a lot more resource into fixing what we see the problems being. You're quite right in saying that we just, there are those that are very young having children with very little support, and we step back and then wonder why we have crisis on our hands, and we can do better.
All right, Social Minister Paula Bennett, thank you for your time this morning.